A parking lot. The kid's a genius. And even if my brother gets back with the bucks, I'm going to tear this building down and turn it into a parking lot. Big stuff. Thanks, cutie pie.
You mean because of me, Maurice is going to lose the Trocadero?
No, not because of you.
Oh, give credit where credit is due. The kid had a great idea. The Trocadero is a memory, and it's all because of you.
I just wanted to let you know about my study group.
Oh, don't be a fuddy-duddy. I'll be your study buddy.
I'm about to embark on one of the great challenges of my scientific career.
This work right here is going to change history.
I think this is going to be our greatest mission.
I don't have time to study. I'll never get into Stanford.
I got big plans for you tonight. I got maps, I got charts. I'm going to see you through this because my credibility is on the line.
It's at this point that you'll want to start taking notes.
Welcome to the Sitcom Study, the podcast where we contemplate the TV shows we grew up with and search for the truth and wisdom within the tropes and cliches. And Amy, what is the trope that has brought us here today?
We've got to save our favorite hangout or they're going to turn it into a parking lot, Jay.
Saving the hangout from destruction, often for the reasons of building a parking lot. Yeah, this is a big trope. We were surprised to find there wasn't a ton of sitcom episodes, or not as many as we would have thought, because I think of this as a ubiquitous trope that you see everywhere.
Yeah, I think the issue with it is that it definitely is a storyline, but it's not like the central thing of each show that it's in oftentimes. I think it's like something that's going on, right?
And it's a larger thing than just sitcoms.
Right.
I was thinking the whole time we were researching this, like there is a big example of this that looms large in my childhood. I'm like, was it a movie? Was it a play? What am I thinking of? And when they started doing all this parking lot talk in these sitcom episodes, I immediately flashed back. Sesame Street Live at Madison Square Garden in 1985. I just researched it. There were, and still are to this day, these touring Sesame Street live productions.
Yes, a friend of mine was in it for a while after high school, yeah.
They would do a different story every 18 months or so. And so, there was a Jamboree one. We had the vinyl album of that. In 1985, the Sesame Street Live production was called Save Our Street. It was about an antagonist named Mr. Meanie that came to Sesame Street and wanted to turn it into a parking lot. And as I'm reading these details, yep, I'm like, this is it. This is why I think of this as such a go-to storyline, is because of this Sesame Street thing that I went to. That's probably like the first major live performance of any kind I ever saw. So yeah, lots of examples of this in and out of sitcoms.
Yeah.
So let's start with the basics here. Now, of course, we all had diners and hangouts and stuff that we had when we were kids. Is there anything for you that specifically comes to mind as like that was the go-to place and it was somehow like jeopardized or something?
Yeah, well, so it's kind of recent and it's a sad story. Our local hangout, the pizza place that like the family that owned it lived in our neighborhood. The kids were my age. The guy's dad had started it. So like my grandparents' generation had been the ones that started it. And yeah, I mean, my brother and I grew up with the two boys. Neither of them wanted to go into the pizza parlor business. And so when that dad, the guy who was in our dad's generation, retired, his sister took it over. And just recently, with 2 hurricanes hitting the area where I grew up, they announced that they are closing, and they've been open since like the 50s. So it's been around for a long, long time. It's real sad. It's the Capona's dugout. They were the sponsors of my brother's Little League team. They always had a team in each of the leagues. Every year they were big sponsors. The guy who owned the place, Al Capona. I know, it's very funny. Yes, they named their kid Al, even though their last name was Capona. But he was my brother's baseball coach. And then after high school football games, I was a cheerleader. And after high school football games and basketball games, that was the hangout. everybody went there after the games. That's where you had your like baseball banquets and that kind of stuff at the end of seasons. So yeah, it's really sad. They just were, costs were skyrocketing and they weren't able to keep it open with all the updates that they needed because of the hurricanes.
Yeah, that's an extremely common thing, unfortunately, whether it's hurricanes, COVID, whatever you want to say. I feel like for me, there's two halves of it. In terms of the hangout thing when I was younger, my mind goes to Enzo's, the pizzeria across the street from my high school, which was also walking distance from my house. And so in these shows, when we're going to have them reveal, oh, such and such diner or whatever is actually owned by the school. Like, this was not literally that, but it almost felt like Enzo's was like unofficially affiliated with the actual school. There was just such a close connection because it was right across the street. Lots of diners and stuff that were beloved haunts. But, you know, of course, what these shows sort of have to get a little wrong by necessity is that even if you have a go-to place in real life, just because of the way the nature of the economy of a town works and like human beings' lives works, like most people like to have a few places they go to. They don't spend every moment in one place. But on the other side of it, the things closing aspect, you know, of course, in New York City, we get tons and tons of turnover. And for me, it was such a big thing throughout my 30s. In my heavy drinking days on Friday, Saturday night, I would go downtown and you had the National Underground bar next door to the Landmark Sunshine movie theater. At the National Underground, you could walk in, no cover, and you would see live bands play. And then they would have the midnight movies at the Sunshine. You got to see the Muppet movie, Raiders of the Lost Ark or whatever at the old midnight movies. That was like the 1-2 punch for me, and just such a pleasant, I just have, such a strong association of like my sort of young adulthood shenanigans.
Yeah, it's so
and those
surprising
places.
You never met a girl.
I tried to. And both of those places within a year or two of each other, they're like hoity-toity, like shitty, expensive restaurants now, or a fancy hotel. And yeah, it's just kind of the way of the world. And as you said, so many of the times in real life, we can't actually save them with a telethon or any of the many, many ideas we're going to get in these sitcom episodes. But yeah, that's what happens, and we have to find a new hangout. All right, what are our shows? What did we watch?
We watched Webster, Season 2, Episode 12. If you're looking for it on streaming, though, I think it said Season 2, Episode 3. But it's called Katherine Fights City Hall. Then we watched Charles in Charge, Season 2, Episode 9, Pizza Parlor Protest, Saved by the Bell. This is Episode 3 of either Season 2 or 3, depending on how they list it.
If you count Miss Bliss as Season 1, it's the second proper season with Kelly and Jesse and all of that.
Yes, exactly. So you're looking for the Saved by the Bell episode called Save the Max. And then Home Improvement Season 8, Episode 21, A Hardware Habit to Break.
Yeah, so Webster, we've covered a handful of times now. We love this little guy, even though he's always burning down the house or inspiring some sort of predatory real estate or something. This is going to be a super sitcom-y episode.
Oh, yeah.
Very, very silly. It starts with Webster saying goodnight to his framed photograph of Gladys Knight.
He's like, "Good night, Miss Knight. You're a pip." And then he goes to take off his clothes and he gets embarrassed because the picture's watching him. And then Ma'am comes to the door and he doesn't see her. So she's just like quietly standing there watching this unfold. And he goes back and he turns around the Gladys Knight photo so she can't see him undressed. And then he goes back over to his bed to take off his jeans again. And Ma'am whistles, like wolf whistles.
Yes.
And he looks back at the picture of Gladys Knight like, oh my goodness, she's talking to me. And then he notices Ma'am and we all laugh.
Yeah, we have pointed out in the past that, there are parallels, obviously, between Webster and Arnold, right? That we had these two little guys in the 80s that were both, sort of a little older than the characters that they were playing. And now, that we're a little bit further along in our sitcom journey here, the differences between these two are very clear to me. Webster is the one you go to for sheer cuteness.
Yes.
Like, he is just a little puppy dog. He really, like, you just watch him walk around, and his, Arnold, well, what's his name? Gary Coleman might as well have been Andre the Giant compared to little Emmanuel Lewis. He's just so tiny. And his whole attitude, like, even though they both have this kids say the darndest thing type of thing, Arnold is all chutzpah and moxie and like, he wouldn't be ashamed or bashful. Webster is all shy and timid and little, oh, mister, I just wanted to say, and so, I don't know, it's just interesting to me how they're sort of like trying to serve this similar demographic, and yet they really are very, very different characters.
Yeah, and I think the situations for both of them on those sets were also very different, right? Like Gary Coleman and all the kids that were on that show ended up in some very grown-up situations, the Trap of the Child Star and all of that. And the Webster set is completely different. You've got a husband and wife playing the parents. Webster's mom is very involved. He's the youngest of a very large family, and he was going to regular school, or at least trying to go to regular school when this was going on. And then the in-betweens would be going to regular school. He wasn't living this like Hollywood lifestyle. And when those kinds of things would happen, he had this solid family to fall back onto. Meanwhile, Gary Coleman's family stealing his money. Yeah. And so it shows the two different trajectories, which ways you can go, because they Arnold, the guy playing Arnold, Gary Coleman, was never wanting to play that. Whereas Webster, Emmanuel Lewis talks about how, I'm an actor. No, I was never embarrassed playing, he was 9 years old when I was 18, because I'm an actor. I'm supposed to be doing different things.
He's like an ambassador for humankind. Like, whenever we're watching these random parades and awards shows and whatnot from the 80s on YouTube, he's always there, just like giving someone the key to the city or something. Like,
he was America's little sweetheart. Yeah. Well, and he was in 50 or something commercials, like 60 commercials before he ever got Webster. He was just this, he was everywhere. We like to watch old commercials, so we've seen a bunch of them.
It makes me want to see, like, around, I don't know, it probably would have been around the time of the real Bad Boys movie if they had made like a Bad Boys-esque movie.
Oh my God, with the two
Gary
of them.
Coleman and Emmanuel Lewis.
That would be
like
amazing.
These young cops. One of them's a little more by the book. One of them's a little more wacky. Yeah, I don't know who's who. I guess Webster, Emmanuel would be the by the book one.
Right.
And Gary Coleman is the Martin Lawrence.
It would be funny to flip it, to like do it the other way.
Yeah. But so I don't know.
Well, Gary Coleman's gone now, so he can't do it.
Well, and they've kind of aged out of it. Although then again, Martin Lawrence and Will Smith are still doing it, so who knows? But so this one, it's all going to be about, he's at the diner, this like greasy ass, and I love a greasy diner, but this is like a dirtier than dirty, grody ass diner that's run by like the grodiest guy in the world.
The hat that he was wearing was so greasy.
It looks like he's modeled after Al from Happy Days.
He does,
he's got that same look.
Yeah.
But just like, on a movie set, sometimes they'll put your clothes in like coffee for a while to make them look like they weren't just purchased. It looked like they like buried this guy's clothes in a landfill or something for like 3 months before they let him wear it. Yeah, it's just so nasty. And Webster is there all by himself. This like 8-year-old kid is there writing his composition, as he puts it, for school. This, just talk about a sitcom written by somebody from like the 1930s. Like, this feels like a Depression era situation. This little kid all by himself at this.
Okay, so Ma'am and George explain that when they get there. Yeah. They're like, they thank what's his name, the guy Maurice. They thank Maurice for keeping an eye on him, because so they're in a city, right? They're in Chicago. So Webster gets out of school before they get off of work, and so he just went
to the Trocadero.
Exactly. He goes to the diner for, an hour or so before his parents.
Daycare. Yeah.
Exactly. Because it's like next door to their building. Yeah. It's like their go-to place, right? It's like Monks in Seinfeld. This is like their greasy spoon where they hang out. And there's all this sports memorabilia all over the walls. And there's a plaque on the wall that is talking about the history of the land. It used to be like, it's right by the train station. So there's all this train stuff, like stuff, celebrating the L. And then there's also a bunch of sports memorabilia. So Maurice is sharing with Webster that his sister is trying to sell the place because they both own it. They inherited it from their dad. And his sister is trying to sell it out from under him. And he's really upset.
He takes a phone call from her and it like zooms in on Webster, like comprehending what this guy is saying to his sister.
So Webster is like, wait, we can't let this happen. We've got to do something. And, Maurice is like, don't worry about it. I'm heading to Milwaukee now. I'm going to go get a loan. It's going to be fine.
Webster has to do the standard little kid thing of offering your piggy bank savings to help with a major financial crisis.
That's right. You can have all the money in my piggy bank. There might even be $12 in there. 12 whole dollars, he says. Yeah. There might even be 12 whole dollars in there.
Yes. So again, cute. Gary Coleman would never say that kind of thing. He'd be like, give me all your money, fool.
Now he's turned into Mr.
Yes,
T.
I might have to cut that out. As you were saying, they're having financial troubles. I noticed this extra in the diner relentlessly salting his sandwich or whatever, and wondering if that was just his choice or if it was going to be part of the story. And then sure enough, Maurice goes over to him and says like, hey, salt's extra, buddy.
Right, because he's trying to save
recurring
money.
Subtrope in these episodes is going to be the proprietor having to be a cheapskate when things get tough.
Right. So he wants to cut costs by not letting this guy use as much salt as he wants. So then George and Ma'am get there and they thank Maurice, and then the guy who's supposed to show up to take over for Maurice so he can go to Milwaukee and see about this loan, Ralph, hasn't shown up yet. So, Webster and George are like, oh, we'll watch the diner. And Ma'am's like, no, we won't. This is not what I do. I am not this person. I am not watching a diner. Yeah. And they're like, it's only going to be for half an hour. It'll be fine. And then turn the page, busiest day of the year.
Sitcom-y turn of events. Yes. Our main family just takes over the restaurant and they just have to run it.
Yeah. Now, Ma'am is in her very expensive work clothes.
I was just going to turn to the fashion aspect of Webster for a second, because yes, we've established already, Ma'am, very tall, striking woman, got huge ass shoulder pads because it's the 80s, and they're bejeweled.
Yes.
So it's calling all of your attention to her gigantic shoulder pads. I also wanted to put out there, is Ma'am the white Grace Jones?
Because she's so tall and she's got short hair.
That tall, skinny look, the spiky hair, the sort of extreme fashion choices.
Yeah.
Like she is kind of like Grace Jones's like milquetoast white counterpart.
She's like David Bowie if he just was like a housewife or something.
Let's see the David Bowie biopic with Ma'am from Webster, or vice versa, the Ma'am biopic starring David Bowie. At least one of them is no longer with us. But yeah, all of them, her fancy outfit, like you're saying, has got flour all over it. They're all covered in food and everything, and it's all comedy of errors, going to hell, nothing's going right. Everybody's yelling at them.
Yeah, George is doing the cooking, and Ma'am and Webster are like the wait staff. And then this lady comes in, and what does Ma'am say when she walks in? She's we
got trouble or something.
Something like that, because she looks like, she's like, oh, the women's prison just arrived or something like that. Because this woman is like...
This is one of the greatest sitcom characters we have ever encountered. I love this lady.
Yeah, she is like, she looks tough as nails.
Yes, she's got, as my friend Michelle liked to say about her grandmother, she's got a shelf. There's big rack just shooting out 90 degrees from her body.
She has a shelf. And she's not like a small woman either.
No, she's basically the female version of this, Maurice guy, who is this big ass dude that looks like Al from Happy Days.
Yeah.
She's just like a big house of a woman, very tough, gruff, kind of lumpy look to her.
Yeah,
and
every time Webster talks, she's like, mind your own business,
she says,
kid.
butt out, kid. I was writing down everything she says. She goes to, what's her face, Katherine, ma'am, when she orders her whatever she wants to eat, she goes, and put a little hustle in your bustle.
She asked for coffee.
Yeah.
Yeah, and don't put any of that fancy stuff in it.
Yeah, so just everything about her. And so it comes out she's Babe. She's Maurice's sister.
Yeah, who's going to sell the
proprietary. I guess she partially owns it with him. Or
yeah, she's the older sister, and she's the one that's been handling the dad's estate, he was explaining. Okay. And so that's why she can technically make those decisions. And what we think at this point, because what Maurice has been telling us and he's been telling Webster, is that it's all about the money. Like, she doesn't care about the business. She doesn't care about the history of the place. She doesn't care about the fact that their dad worked there and it was their family business and everything. She just wants the money. Yeah. And so that's what we think of her. And she comes in all tough like this, you know?
When Katherine says something back to her, she goes, "You got moxie, toots."
I like you.
This 80s version of the tough dame.
But she describes herself as not having a lot of time because she's a dancer and she's got to go get to her event.
Yeah, I thought that was just a joke.
So she finally pays attention to Webster when he says, we wouldn't want him to, tear this place down and turn it into a parking lot or something like that. And she was like, "Ooh, a parking lot. Yes. That's a great idea, kid." And she just turns it all around and she's like, "Thank you so much. I never would have thought of that idea. We'd make so much money turning this into a parking lot. No, don't try to shirk.
Like, Webster, I owe it all to you."
Yeah, exactly. It's all you. Don't try to not take responsibility for that great idea. If it wasn't for you, this place would still be the Trocadero. And then he's like, "Oh no, I've got to find a way to save it because it's my fault that she's going to turn it into a parking lot."
Yeah. Now, while we're on the fashion, in this next scene, they go to where I thought at first they were in their house. They're in somebody's house.
They're at Maurice's house feeding his parrot.
Okay. George is wearing this crumpled up fisherman's hat.
He was wearing that at the beginning too. Yeah, that's just his normal hat.
It's so crumpled up. It these things, they're so distressed, seemingly on purpose. It just looked like he looks again like some sort of Depression era, he's a tramp that just got off the boxcar or something.
Except for it's not like a dusty hat. It's blue with a red stripe.
Yeah, it's also
kind of
clown.
floppy. It's just kind of floppy. Yeah, I noticed it when they first came into the diner, and I was like, that's kind of a weird hat. But then they did the open, and he's wearing a hat like that in some of the shots during the credit sequence.
So when they're at his house and they're digging through things, this is going to be similar to some of the other shows where we're going to get sort of a multi-pronged approach, right? Everyone starts having different ideas of oh, look, I could have it declared a landmark.
Right.
So I could go to the bureaucrats. And meanwhile, George is well, I'm a television news guy. I can do a story.
Yeah, he's a sports guy.
Right. And then Webster is he's eventually just going to do straight up appeal to her humanity.
Yeah.
But I guess before that, in terms of the City Hall thing, we've got, what I think is a very sort of classic now sitcom situation we've seen again and again. An entire bureaucracy represented by one fuddy-duddy guy at a desk that you have to go up to and try to plead your case to.
Right. Well, so Ma'am works at City Hall. Mm-hmm. That is her job. She works in the mayor's office, so she has clout. She figures she can get any commissioner she needs to come and talk to her because of, the weight that she carries by working in the mayor's office. And this commissioner, Mr. Vander Wunder.
Oh, yes. Very fun name-related humor. His name is Commissioner Van Vanderman.
Yeah. And it is so long that on IMDb, they just call him the commissioner.
Yeah.
They do not use the name. So he has a new secretary, and this new secretary is very good at his job and is not letting anybody in to see the commissioner. It doesn't matter who you are, and is being very bureaucratic about it, and is saying "Oh, well, then you work in the mayor's office, so you understand the importance of filling out this form before you get in to see him." And she's like, "But I have an appointment. Just tell him I'm here." And he's like, "Right, right, but everyone has to fill out this form. So she's sitting there filling out the form, and she's telling Webster, like, oh, I just know if I can get him to stick his head out here, then he'll talk to me because of who I am. And he's like, oh, let's do the thing we did in my school play.
Remember my school play, Fern Fever? Let's do that. Yeah.
And so he hides behind the plant.
I would love to see what this play, Fern Fever, was that involved this plant.
Just plants moving around the stage all the time. So he hides behind the plant, this like tall plant, and Ma'am just keeps moving it closer and closer to the door.
She goes, oh, excuse me, Mr. Secretary. Could I just suggest that we move this plant? Wouldn't it look nicer over here in front of the door?
Well, she moves it like 3 times before he realizes what she's doing. And he's like, what are you doing? And then she says that. And she goes, doesn't it look nicer there? And she comes over to his desk, and he's like, no, it's blocking, the commissioner's door.
All just to obscure Webster from, who's going to sneak into the office.
Who's going to sneak in the office. And she says, no, you just need to get a fresh look at it. Let me turn you around and you can see it anew. And then as she turns his chair around backwards, the door opens and closes, and, we don't see Webster go in because he's hidden by the plant. And then he turns back around, and then out comes the commissioner. Oh, no. The little boy's room is this way. Here's where you go.
The commissioner is immediately tossing Webster out. So they could have accomplished the same thing by just having Webster scamper into his office.
Right. But the point was that the secretary was watching so closely that he would have noticed Webster opening the door.
But I'm just saying, like, the way that it's laid out, Webster, like, the result of getting this guy's attention and everything would have been exactly the same. Webster could have made it to the door. The secretary would see him and say, no, don't do that. But it would accomplish the same thing. By the time the secretary is out from behind his desk, Webster's already been tossed out of the office.
Jay, don't you understand? They had to obscure Webster.
Yeah. So the guy comes out. This is this actor. I was surprised because he's only in it for like a second.
Yeah.
You recognize him from something. I'm pretty sure he's one of the actors, one of the lawyers in The Social Network.
Oh, maybe. He was the principal in Heathers. I know him as Edward Quartermain from General Hospital. He was one of these guys that was on General Hospital for like 30 years or something. Yeah,
he's like, oh, I'll get out of here. And so then, Katherine tries to get his attention, and it doesn't work, right?
Yeah, he says, okay, well, come on in, let's talk. So they have a conversation, but we don't get to see that. All we see is them coming back to the diner dejected.
Yeah.
Because he says, it turns out that even though Babe Ruth ate there and Al Capone ate there and all these sports stars used to come in and get food there, it doesn't matter. The place isn't old enough to be considered to be a historic landmark yet.
Yeah. And then George, meanwhile, is back at the diner doing his little news broadcast thing. This was where you were just like jumping out of your skin.
Oh, it was the most annoying thing ever. So they had this like greasy producer guy who was like, he's like a photographer of some like model babe type photo shoot.
Yes, he was like, great babe, cut babe, you're fabulous babe.
I'm like, first of all, like, you're not going to have a producer who acts like that in local news.
That's like when you're filming like a Cyndi Lauper album cover or something.
Yes, he was acting like an agent. And I'm like, what are you auditioning for? Because this is not this part. He was so obnoxious. And then they had another guy come over and like powder George's face.
Yeah, they're doing his makeup.
And I'm like, look,
stuff.
Okay, you're in Chicago. Okay, it's a big market. And he's a sports guy at this big, at this TV station, big market like Chicago, understandable. I'm going to tell you right now, it doesn't matter who you are in fucking Chicago or New York or any of these local markets. No one is doing remotes live with a makeup person coming with them. You probably don't even have a producer with you. But anyway, so George is going to do, he's going to do like a long form kind of story for his sports segment about this place. Yeah. And he's going to do his sports broadcast from there,
It starts with him going, just a normal hash house to some, but to the babe, home.
Right. And that's when the producer's like, cut, take, print. Yes, we got it. That's perfect.
I guess we're going out of order here because somewhere along the line, Webster sits down with Babe by herself. She lifts him up on the counter and goes, "Come here, cutie face." And she opens up to him about, part of the reason I'm doing this is because my dad drove himself crazy with this place. And so, what's his name? Maurice, in the end, will thank me. If I turn this place into a parking lot, even though he thinks he likes working here, he doesn't.
Right.
And so that's all sort of like in motion because, this ending part that we're talking about where they're trying to do the telecast from the place and that's not working. It turns out Babe Ruth only went to the bathroom here. He didn't eat here, whatever. Eventually, Babe's going to come back and be like, you know what? I changed my mind and it's all good.
Right. Well, so she's there during all of this. She's during the what's going to be their live show. She is and her brother are both running the diner, right? And so they're getting ready to go live. And she, after having this conversation with Webster, Ma'am comes in with the photos. And she's the one who says, "Oh, no, those are fakes. My dad made up all those stories." He was always tired. But yeah, there was one time the Babe came in here and it wasn't to sit at the counter. And they were like, "What? He used the bathroom?" And then they start counting George down, 5, 4. And he's like, "Oh, God," because he has this whole story about how this was the Babe's favorite hangout. And that's how we find the reason Babe, the sister, is called Babe is because the dad named her after Babe Ruth. Again, always the salesman, right? Yeah, this was Babe's hangout. No, he came and pooped here once, right? And so then the older sister Babe is explaining, "Oh no, those are fakes. My dad was always just trying to drum up support for the place and was, he's like, yeah, he faked those. He went and stole them from another diner. That's not even our counter." And so then George has to go live and sort of fumble his way through the story and not lie, and say that this is where they ate. So they're all bummed out because, well, that's the end of it. And they're not going to be able to save the place because there's nothing they can do. And it turns out all the things they were trying, all the historical reasons they were trying to save the place aren't true anyway. And then I don't remember if it was just a commercial and we come back, but that's when you've got Babe the sister being like, this is such a small plot of land. We'd only be able to get 2 Subarus on here anyway. So I'm not really going to turn it into a parking lot. But, I don't want my brother to have to work himself to death like my dad did. So
she just changes her mind.
Yeah,
right?
She says this place is like family and I don't have to look out for my little brother as much as I thought I did. If this makes him happy and you guys are like his family and you guys are looking out for him in this way, then he's okay and it's all right. I don't need to meddle in his business. He can keep the place. It's going to be fine.
Yeah. So it's weird. What this has in common, like I said, with the other ones is the sort of let's try all these different ideas and see what works. But I feel like the difference is I don't know. We've only seen a few episodes of Webster, but I don't think this diner was that big of a presence compared to the Max and some of these other places.
100%. It's like the place that we didn't know that they hung out because they'd never done a story about it before.
It seems like I guess what I'm going to put out there maybe about this trope in general is this is not necessarily one of those what lessons can we learn? What rites of passage can we prepare the viewers for? This is more about what's a problem that we can solve? What's a simple objective, an obstacle, and we need to overcome it. And like we said at the beginning, it has its basis in real life, but there's not a whole lot of substance to it in terms of character growth or anything like that, and with this one at the end, especially, it's just going to be okay, you convinced me. I won't make a parking lot. Never mind.
Never mind. I wasn't going to get that much money anyway.
All right, so much for that one. Let's move on to Charles in Charge.
Season 2, Episode 9, Pizza Parlor Protest.
Yep. What can we say? Charles.
No, what can you say? I have plenty to say.
Charles, no last name. We know him. We love him. I am clearly on the record at this point.
You know him. Please stop speaking for me.
Now, in this one, we get not 1, not 2, but 3 completely silent young women that have to sit there and be hit on by Charles and Buddy.
3. I
and
only
not
remember
speak.
2. Who was the other one?
There's one in the middle. I've got them all notated here. But yeah, we've talked before about how it's a thing on TV where sometimes to avoid paying the actors more, they'll have a certain kind of contract where even though they're like sitting there at the table with the main character.
Yeah, being talked to.
Right. If they don't speak, if they just smile and nod, they're considered a featured extra versus a day player or something, and they get away with paying them less or whatever.
Yeah.
So as a result, you get lots of scenes in Charles in Charge, Saved by the Bell, etc., where you've got our main funny guy coming onto a lady and they just kind of look around and smile or roll their eyes or something and never actually say anything. And we get that multiple times in this episode. It's eventually going to become part of the story that Charles doesn't know their names. But yeah, this whole first scene, for better or worse, classic Charles, where you've got him just like speaking to this woman like this sort of, oh, let me show you around. And then when Buddy comes to say his dumb thing, Charles is like, Buddy, I happen to be talking to this young lady.
Right.
Because he doesn't know her name.
To which Buddy's like, do you even know her name? Which I was like, a smart line from Buddy. Who knew?
Yeah. But this is all happening in Sid's Pizza Parlor.
Yes.
This is before Charles' mom has canonically purchased the Yesterday Cafe and opened up that. That became the hangout.
I was going to say, she owned the Pizza Parlor
she
too
purchases
for a
the
while.
parlor and then she turns it into, or she just gets a whole different place?
I think
different.
I think she sells Sid's and buys the part.
But none of that has happened yet. We might not have even met Charles's mom in the show yet. This is still relatively early going, and this is just a straight up. It's a pizza parlor, and they like hanging out there.
This has been their hangout. It's on campus. This has been their hangout through all of season 1, and now kind of midway into season 2.
On our episode all about hangouts, I think that this was the one where the pizza looks really good.
Oh, yeah.
And it makes us want to eat.
Every time they have pizza, except, you know what's interesting, though, is that the pizza this time in this episode, because in this episode, there was not a lot of pizza on the tables. There were more like baskets and drinks and stuff. But the pizza that was on the table in the very first scene where he's talking to the silent girl or hitting on the silent girl.
Silent girl number 1.
Silent girl number 1. There is a pizza on the table then, and it doesn't look as good as like in previous times.
So we're going to get Sid, the pizza guy, is going to get a letter from the school that's going to lay out everything, right? So lots of overlaps here.
But
First
only
of all,
after we found out that they're all laughing at this other hangout down the street that's trying to get started.
Right.
It's new.
Nobody ever goes to Hamburger Harry's.
That's right, which is why they're giving away fries for free.
Yes. So they're all having a good laugh at the expense of Hamburger Harry. When they get this letter, this letter is going to be about how the school board, and we just need to mark this recurring
The board
trope,
of trustees.
right?
Yep.
That the school literally owns the restaurant, which I guess makes sense because it's on school property, which is not necessarily the case with the Max.
Right.
But they're choosing between 2 different locations for their new parking lot, right?
Yes.
Once again, the oblivion of the restaurant is in the form of a parking lot.
Yes, and it's between their location and what's called Lot 405.
Right. And we get, I love the specific names that they come up with in these shows. Harrison Bartlett looms over these entire proceedings. They get this name out of the letter.
Chairman of the trustees.
Chairman of the trustees, and just the number of times that they say the phrase Harrison Bartlett throughout the episode. And granted, it's going to be to establish, so we have clues to figure out the mystery. But yeah, it just cracked me up. Everyone's talking about Harrison Bartlett, and he's going to be the one who's going to make this decision. They've got to figure out a way to petition him to get him to make sure that, he chooses the other lot for the parking lot. Now, I also want to start, we're getting a lot of fashion talk in this episode, in this podcast. I should say that we're pretty concentrated time-wise here. We got lots of 80s, early 90s stuff going on.
84 is Webster, 87 Charles in Charge, 90 Saved by the Bell, and then 99 for Home Improvement.
Now, as much as I love Charles and everything he does.
Wait, you're saying you don't like these pants that have the waistband?
These pants
that are that's like a 14-inch waistband?
It's going to start with Charles, and then AC Slater is going to take that ball and really run with it.
He was wearing them too.
They're
like gathered and pleated.
Right. So, pleats for days is the phrase that I have written down. They're these big-ass pleated, like parachute-shaped pants.
But not parachute-shaped. They're just big, and then what they do with all the pleats at the top is they fold them all over each other and sew them into this, I'm going to say a good 6 to 7 inches
the part
wide
where your
waistband.
belt is supposed to go is like the height of 3 belts.
Yes.
So you just get, it's almost like you're like a robot, like C-3PO, and you have like a little thorax part in your middle that's just like neither your chest nor your legs.
It's a man girdle. That's what it's there for. It's holding their belly.
So bizarre. Charles isn't wearing a belt, so he's just got this like 3 times as high as it should be, like belt space on his pants. Weird as hell. Let's start tracking that now. And so, they've got a clear mission. Get a hold of Harrison Bartlett. Convince him not to demolish Sid's Pizza.
Yeah, because maybe he can, if you get him on your side, then maybe he'll convince some of the other trustees.
So many Charles in Charge plots are this. It's about, we need to convince Mr. Lowenstein to not...
The dean of the College of Journalism.
Now we've got a fun little B-plot that is going to tie into all of this, where Jamie and Sarah, the 2 daughters, it's career week at their school. You were also
2 weeks.
You were also pretty upset about this notion.
Yep.
I don't remember having anything like this either. We had various various career types.
They're not in the same grade, so
no. Well, it's a school-wide thing. Obviously.
Sure, okay, it's a school-wide thing. For the next 2 weeks, we got to pick our careers today that we're going to study for the next 2 weeks.
Yeah,
they're not in the same grade, and then. What do you think, Jamie?
Right.
All you know about Jamie's character, what she's into, what makes her happy, the things that she cares most about in life.
Right.
What career do you think she picked?
Let's start with Sarah, because this one makes more sense. She wants to study journalism, all right? And that's something she's had some, at least, I think she's been more into poetry.
Yeah, and being a novelist. You kind of hear
Jamie,
more about
as you're hinting at, the person whose only sort of like productive interest that has ever been voiced is fashion. And that's her only passion.
We have a later episode where she's like, the only thing I ever want to do in life is be a model. It's the only thing I'm good at. Let me do this modeling class.
Right.
No. Does she pick modeling? Absolutely not. She picks psychiatry.
Right. She wants to be a psychiatrist.
That's right, because Jamie is definitely going to med school.
All right, well, look, let's not, pin her down. She's got her whole life ahead of her. So those are their 2 things. So it's a funny recurring thing that anything that happens, Sarah sees it as an opportunity to sort of document and report on and give me the what, the why, and the how. And Jamie wants to analyze, like, well, how do you feel about that? And what is the cause of all that? So we're setting the seeds for that. That's all going to come into play. And then we get, the mom comes. This is when the mom was still around. She hadn't been driven off the show yet. And she
this
says,
is her first season, because this is season 2, so it's the first season with this family.
Mm-hmm. She says, this reminds me of the flower power days from the 60s. You need to have a protest.
Yes, and Charles has the best line ever, which I was like, this is why we're in the world that we are right now. He says, yes, she's like, the children of the 60s, we protested when adults were trying to take away the things we loved and cared about, we protested. And he was like, yeah, but children of the 80s, we throw a party. And I was like, oh boy. Now we know why we have Trump.
Look, there's such a thing as a fundraiser. It's, they're both viable options. So we're going to get a multi-pronged strategy here. The kids want to interview and psychologically profile people respectively, I guess. They want to use their new skills.
Yes, Sarah's like, oh, there's definitely a story here. I want to dig deeper. And, and then Jamie's just like, so what do you think his motivation is?
Yeah. And, like we said, the mom wants to have a protest.
She's trying to help Charles have a protest.
Right. Charles says, instead of that, let's do a Hawaiian night,
Hawaiian night party. Because he says, children of the 80s, we throw parties. Everybody to come there. He's going to get Harrison to come, this Harrison Bartlett guy to come.
He wants to show him how popular Sid's is, to show him what a big deal it is to all the students.
Right. They're having the party, and the place is packed like it always is, and everybody's in their Hawaiian night thing.
Yes.
And in comes Harrison Bartlett.
Now, we also get, before that, this is Dina or Dinah. This is the second silent woman.
Oh, that's right.
So
the
it's
one who
not the
sits
button
on
at
Buddy's
the end.
lap.
Yes, this is someone that's hanging out with Buddy. We get our second woman who doesn't speak, who smiles and demurs when Buddy talks about her.
Buddy comes in to sit at the table with Charles, and Charles is already sitting there with like 3 girls, and Buddy lifts this girl off the chair and puts her back down on his lap.
Yes,
and
like
then,
so much chattel.
Yes, and then proceeds to use both his arms to talk in front of her. Meanwhile, he is like knocking the shit out of her boob with his elbow while he's taking the albums that he's purchased out of this plastic bag. And she like is not leaning back because, she's trying to stay in the scene. And he is literally like, have you ever sat in someone's lap and had them like talk across you with both of their arms?
I mean, not lately.
The way you would sit in someone's lap is that they would have one of their arms around you. And if they were gesticulating, they'd be gesticulating on both sides of you, right? Or just with one hand. No, not Buddy. I don't know how this girl didn't fall over backwards with the way that she was perched, and he's like banging into her. Exactly. There was somebody like holding her up, I think.
Yeah. Harrison Bartlett does show up. He's very like friendly and amiable. He says, this is very impressive. Another one of these character actors we recognize as a stuffy old guy in a tie.
Oh, he's been in everything. Like, his name's James Karen, and he has been in one episode of every show you've ever seen.
Yes, always
and he's
as this
also
guy.
been in any movie that ever dealt with the government ever.
Yes, always some sort of congressman or somebody asking you, what is the meaning of this?
Shirt, exactly.
But so he comes and says, this is all very well and good, but unfortunately, we had a emergency meeting or whatever. We've already voted. The board has already decided that we are going to bulldoze this place, and it is going to be a parking lot. So congratulations.
This is a wonderful goodbye party for it.
Exactly. And and so that's that.
So our main guys are just like completely crushed. They were going at this with their best efforts. They'd done everything they thought they could, but then they find out at the last minute, this guy called a board meeting early because they weren't supposed to vote until later in the week. He calls a board meeting early and gets the vote passed.
And this is where you get Sarah's journalistic, nose for news starting to come into play. And yes, John Grisham himself could not have devised such a, labyrinthine plot twist like this. They start having their suspicions. And this is also Charles in charge. He's like Sherlock Holmes or like Hercule Poirot when he's sort of like, I've got an idea. You don't need to know what it is. Just follow my instructions, get everybody together, and I will reveal everything, right? And so this is another thing that happens all the time. They get Walter, the grandpa, they're like, just make a phone call and tell this guy that you want him to come to the house because you want to donate money, right? Like everything happens in their living room in the world of Charles in Charge. So this guy...
they said we need to get him on our turf.
Yeah, but that's always their move, get them on our turf. And so, Charles, Walter Powell, the grandpa, calls Mr. Bartlett and says, like, come over to my house and I'll give you a donation for the, the Alumni Association or whatever.
Right.
And Charles is getting ready to spring the trap because Harrison Bartlett doesn't know that Walter Powell...
Charles doesn't know yet.
Well, but I'm saying that Harrison doesn't know that when he goes to Walter Powell's house, that this happens to also be the dwelling of one Charles, no last name, who lives there.
In charge.
Exactly. So yeah, Harrison shows up to personally accept this donation while Charles, he's not back yet. He's still out getting all the information he needs to.
Well, he's not. He was going to the university to try to get stuff from like the office.
Yeah, I feel
there.
like some of this information.
They went to the other lot to check out the lot 405.
Right.
They went to the college to find out where lot 405 was, and then they went to lot 405 to find out what was on it. That's what Charles did. But the mom was the one who works in the state office. So the mom is able to go into the records, the state records, because she works in the state offices. That's as vague as they could possibly be. And so she comes home with the real info that, so Charles comes back, right? Charles comes back first, he and Buddy, and Mr. Bartlett is like, what is going on here? I am uncomfortable. What do you mean you two know each other? Yeah. What is this? And he's like, Mr. Bartlett, we went to lot 405 and we were just really confused as to why like you would vote for SIDS to be bulldozed when there's only a shed on lot 405. There's no business there that you're getting rid of. So why would you guys vote for this? And he's like, I don't have time for this. I don't have time for this. And they're like, and also there were only 3 board members at that emergency meeting you called. So that's not enough.
Shenanigans.
That's not enough to actually pass the vote because you don't have a quorum. They didn't use the word quorum because they don't know those words. And then the mom comes in and hands Charles this paperwork, and Mr. Bartlett's trying to hustle out the door, and she's like, oh no, just wait a minute. And Jamie and Sarah come back in and try to interview him with their silly questions. And then Charles is like, oh, so hold on a minute. I know why. And he reveals that Harrison Bartlett is Hamburger Harry.
Yeah, it's like, it's this paper trail. It's like, oh, so this Hamburger Harry's place is owned by such and such corporation, which is owned by that conglomerate or whatever. And then, it all comes back to him. And yes, Harrison Bartlett is Mr. Harrison Q Hamburger or whatever of Hamburger Harry's. And yes, so this was all a huge conflict of interest, corrupt shenanigans thing.
Yep.
And
because his business couldn't compete with Sid's, and so he was trying to shut it down based on what his, with his power on this board of trustees, and because it's land leased from the college, right? Sid, the guy we meet as Sid is actually Sid's son.
Sid Jr.,
yeah. But so his dad leases the land from the college. So anyway, they don't go to his bosses about this. They just tell him he has to, we've got the goods. You've got to recuse yourself from all of this and all future real estate, votings. Yes. You can't do
You'll
this
never
anymore.
lease in this town again.
Yeah, basically they just threaten him and say, we're going to go public with all of this unless you do right, and you have to do right from now on. And I'm like, wait. So we're not going public with this information about this
Harrison
men being
Bartlett
corrupt?
is free to reign terror.
Because Charles, no last name, only cares about his pizza place. He doesn't care about the good of the rest of the people. And that's how we know Charles, no last name, is a Trump supporter.
Harrison Bartlett did seem pretty contrite. I feel like he learned his lesson.
Sure he did. Until the next time, his pocketbooks can be lined.
This, again, I feel like in some ways, it is quite similar to the Webster thing in the sense that we have a clear antagonist, right? It all sort of boils down to like, there's this one character that's just going to be like our bad guy this week, and we need to convince them, we need to foil them or whatever. So again, I think it's fun. Like they kind of do the same thing with it. They both sort of go like, all right, let's divvy up the cast. And like, we've got a little mission. We've got you try to find some information. You try to, go on TV or whatever. You appeal to the person's compassion, and then we have different outcomes, or different ways of defeating them. But yeah, it's a similar sort of vibe, I feel like.
Oh, and this is the first time that we get the reference, even though all of them are talking about turning this into a parking lot. He says, they're going to pave my literal paradise to put up a parking lot.
Yep, which does make me wonder, like there's a little bit of a chicken and the egg thing going on here. Is the song You know, like, did all of this cliche of always turning everything into a parking lot come from the song, or was the song responding to a tendency in the 70s and 80s to bulldoze things and make a lot of parking lots because more people were driving cars?
Yeah, Big Yellow Taxi is the name of the song. It is a Joni Mitchell song from the 70s. It was a protest song that was absolutely protesting what you're talking about. But so yes, like I think it's both.
Yes, it's the snake sort of eating its own tail with the paving paradise in the parking lots. Okay, moving on to Saved by the Bell.
Season 3, Episode 3, Save the Max.
Yeah, so talk about your overlapping tropes. There's a couple of things intersecting here on this Saved by the Bell episode. This is the school radio station episode,
yes.
Maybe even more than it is the Save the Max episode. I feel like we're going to get more screen time devoted to the Saved by the Bell gang as radio personalities than saviors of the Max.
Yeah, what this tells me is that the writer's room just had too many ideas.
Yeah,
this could have been
amazingly.
2 separate episodes of Saved by the Bell.
Yeah. The Max, of course, I'm sure it had a presence on our Best TV Hangouts episode. This is, I feel like more than any other TV Hangout, the Max really stretched the limits of what could be done at a diner, right? Well, literally everything in their lives.
But also at school, because as we find out in this episode, the reason the Max is about to be shut down is that the school board is going to shut it down because Max owes $10,000 in back rent.
Yeah.
I think I'm on the side of the adults in this episode.
Yeah, this is the first time we're switching it up a little bit in the sense that it's not like just some, nefarious, individual that wants to turn it into a parking lot.
Although they are making it out that the school board is the bad guys for wanting to shut down the Max because, Max isn't paying his rent.
Yes.
And I was like, hold on a minute. So we find out kind of all of this stuff really quickly, that the school board it owns the property, that it, like your place Enzo's, is across the street from the school.
Yes.
So the kids go there for lunch every day. So they're not giving the school board or the money by, going to lunch in the cafeteria. They're going to lunch across the street.
This makes
They're
no sense.
spending lots of money all the time. But this guy, Max, who's so busy being a magician, poof, makes his rent money disappear.
Yeah.
I think Max is a cokehead.
Or an embezzler of some kind. Yeah, none of this makes any sense. The fact that the school owns the restaurant is strange. At that point, as you're saying, it's effectively a cafeteria, an off-campus cafeteria.
But the school doesn't own the restaurant. The school, like the school in, like the college in Charles in Charge, leases the land to Max.
They're still the one that you have to pay the money to
right, but they don't own a restaurant, right? Like they're not owning and running a restaurant. They're not taking any revenue from the restaurant.
Well, that's kind of what I'm saying.
Other than the fact that they are being paid rent. And like $10,000 is not a little rent. Like he didn't miss a couple payments. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Now, obviously, this is told from the kids'
in
point of view.
1990, right?
Yeah, it's told from the kids' point of view, so we understand why they would be bummed out by the Max going away. But yes, this presents a logical economic reason why they might have to shut down.
Right.
Now, it's not necessarily a logical economic solution to serve tiny hamburgers in your diner as a way of dealing with
He served sliders. That was how the gang found out that the Max was in trouble. Because he was like, oh, my overhead's going through the roof and I can't keep up with it and my expenses and everything. So instead of serving regular size hamburgers, he was serving sliders.
Right. And it's so funny when at first they're cracking wise, like, hey, Max, good trick. You made the hamburgers turn tiny. And then when he goes well, no, actually, guys, this really is your order. It's because of the bills or whatever. And Slater goes, oh, Max, I'm so sorry. It was though they just said hey, I just banged your mom. And then they found out, my mom just died. It's so deadly serious.
That's traumatic, but okay.
And so, that's hanging over the rest of the episode. Oh no, the Max is in financial trouble. What are we going to do?
We should have a fundraiser for it. And hey, we just now have this awesome radio station that we're all really good at being on, except for Slater.
Right. Now, you know, I agree we don't need to get too bogged down by this, but it is the main focus of the episode that Zack and Screech have found this radio station in a room of the school that has been untouched since 1969, right?
1968,
There's sheets over all the equipment and everything, and so they discover, oh my God, it's WKTTNY or KTTY, the
Not
radio
NY.
station. That's what I'm used to from where I am. And so they're like,
no W either because it's West Coast, so it's KTTY.
Okay. They're pulling the sheets off of the equipment, and some of this equipment looks like something from Frankenstein's laboratory,
Or
right?
KKTY, that's what it is.
Not necessarily like a radio station, but yeah, they've got like all this crazy equipment, and they're like, all right, like we're gonna have a radio station. And so in true Saved by the Bell fashion, the, 4 or 5 characters we know are the only ones that participate in this school-wide thing.
Well, they convince Mr. Belding, like, oh, it's such a great thing. It'll be this great project, except for, like, when are they doing it? Because it seems to be during the school day, and they're kind of, like, always on the air.
This is like everything in Saved by the Bell. There's no other priorities for them, and there's no other students involved. It's just Zack and his friends in charge of everything. So we've got this great lineup, right, where we've got Zack as Wolfman Zack, the rock DJ.
The Big Bopper.
Which, again, well, no, it's Belding is the Big Bopper.
Oh, that's right. Belding's the Big Bopper.
Zack is Wolfman Zack, which, again, it just, in general, all this talk in these shows about the 60s and everything, flower power, it just always blows my mind to think, like we say all the time, we were born in 79. We didn't live through the 60s. So when we're watching shows like this in the late 80s, early 90s, and they're talking about, oh, I was Big Bopper back in the 60s, or making reference to Wolfman Jack, like these things were like ancient history to us. And it's so funny that would be like now if there was an episode of a new sitcom and they were talking about something from like 2012 or something, you know what I mean? Like it's not 2000, long before.
Yeah, not 2012, because it was
it depends on what you're talking about.
20 years difference. It was this was 1990. That was 1968 when the radio station closed down. So that's
like Wolfman,
22 years apart?
Wolfman Jack is a little more recent. Like just in general, this thing of the 60s and the 70s.
So it would be stuff from around 2000.
Yeah, it's the previous generation is the point I'm trying to make.
It's 20 years earlier.
And it's the hippies. And now, this is their whatever the 80s kids were. And I'm just saying it just blows my mind to kind of consider that like how recent those things were.
Yeah.
Because I still think of the 60s as the 60s. Like that was the last step before now. And it's like, no, like even the 90s is further back in some cases than
the 60s were
relationships,
now. Yes,
these
absolutely.
sitcoms were to the 60s. Anyway, so this is all going to come out, we should say, because Jessie, she's the one with the nose for news in this one, picking up from Sarah and Charles in Charge. She has discovered this newspaper article with the 2-page spread of young Richie Belding's ass because he mooned the school board in protest of the ban on jeans and long hair.
That's right.
Back in the 60s.
Yes.
And so when Zack shows him this newspaper that Jessie has found, he goes, Zack, if this got out, it could ruin me.
I know, which cracks me up. It's like, it's
like
in
principal
the same town.
is like an elected office.
But what's so funny about it is that like everybody knew, you know what I mean? It's this small little town, I guess it's not. It's in, it's supposed to be outside LA or whatever. But like how he went to that same school. There are definitely teachers there that remember little Richie Belding mooning the school board, and now he's their boss.
Yeah, his point sort of makes sense. Like, oh, look, like the students don't know about this and whatever. It would be embarrassing if you brought more attention to this. But it is just funny the way he says that so seriously. This would ruin me. And so, yeah.
He's like, do you understand what I've had to do to the school board over the years so that they trusted me in the first place?
And this was one of the things that I remember watching Saved by the Bell, even at like 10 years old on the reruns after school, and thinking like, this is dumb. The way that he makes this turnaround so quickly when Zack gives him this little lecture. He goes like, you're not the man I wanted. I thought you could help us save the Max, but I need this guy in this newspaper article, not you. You've grown old. You've forgotten all, he makes this whole little speech. And Mr. Belden goes, Zack Morris. And Zack like turns around as he's getting ready to leave. He goes, help me find the old me.
Yeah, I know. I laughed out loud with
so
incredulity.
Cheesy. Yeah, they couldn't give that one more little workaround. But yeah, and so from then on, Belding is fully back into bopper mode.
Yeah. He sits in as one of the DJs when they're doing the like all night telethon to raise $10,000 to help save the Max. And he's got his old bandana on and he's going for it.
Does he even have his old mustache, or is that just in the flashback?
I think that's just in the flashback.
Yeah, right. We should say we got the purple edged flashback where that was the full on wig, mustache, 70s clothes. And now when he comes to the Max as the bopper, he almost has this fun like casual Friday principal thing where he's wearing sort of like blue jeans and again the baseball type shirt with the stripes.
He's wearing his old
edge.
varsity jacket from Bayside. It's like the old fashioned version of what they wear. It is a Letterman's jacket.
And but still his little tie and button up shirt and everything. And he's kind of bouncing around and running all over the place. And yeah, he has this like youthful energy.
They're raising money, and the only thing that so the thing that we kind of glossed over was Slater wants to do sports.
Yeah.
The radio station.
We got to just give a second to everybody's radio persona,
right?
Because this is great. That's Zack is Wolfman Zack, the rock DJ, and then Jessie is the journalist.
Yeah.
So they show her in the first part going like, tater tots are overpriced, or some expose or something. Lisa is the gossip girl, right?
Yeah.
That makes sense.
And we get some great sort of first last name characters,
But that makes sense for a high school. You would be like, Jennifer so-and-so. And then here's where it starts getting funny. Kelly is Kelly Desire, right? So on this school radio program that goes on like during the school day, she's like reading erotica to them.
Not at all. What the shit is wrong with you? She's like Delilah.
But what
the love letter. Oh,
like
romance
advice?
Yes, like romance is wonderful. So if you want to have a nice romantic moment with your honey, listen to a song like this, and then Screech plays some horrible song.
Okay, so she's like a DJ. Okay.
Yeah, she's like Delilah, the DJ.
I know Delilah from...
If you don't say from the radio, then you don't know who I'm talking about. So Delilah is like a John Tesh. Have you ever heard of the John Tesh radio
Sleepless in
show?
Seattle. Isn't that Delilah, or that was just someone modeled on her?
That was sort of. So Delilah is not all advice. Delilah it's music, but like also she'll take callers who are requesting, like, they're not really seeking advice, but they tell their like lost love story or their happy love story. And then she's like, I'm going to see if I can find a song for you. She doesn't, she gives a little bit of advice, but she's not like a Dear, Abby or anything like that.
But it was what we actually hear Kelly say as Kelly Desire is just a few seconds of like, okay, everybody turn the lights down low and light some candles and we're going to get amorous. So we don't know what her actual content is.
Oh, yeah.
All right. She's Kelly Desire. And then Screech does Screech's Mystery Theater, where he does like scary stories, but in this voice like Igor. And and that's everybody. And then we get to Slater. He says, I want to do sports casting. Nobody knows this about me, but when I watch TV at home, the sports on TV, I like to turn the sound off and do my own play-by-play, right? And so they're like, okay, sure, like that makes sense. You can do sports. And then character trait only brought up in this episode and never ever again. Slater is uncharacteristically
bad.
Yeah, like he doesn't get stage fright. He's like the lawyer in My Cousin Vinny. He just like can't string a sentence together.
He reads his copy and then he gets to a thing that he thinks is a joke, but they're all like dumb old dad jokes.
Yeah.
And then he pulls out this horn and goes,
Yeah.
and it makes this horrible sound. And everyone's like, is this funny? Like, what is going on?
The reaction shot, because Lisa does not get to do much in this episode. She has her little gossip thing, but the reaction shot of Lisa looking up and looking over to him, realizing like, oh, he sucks. Like, that is very funny.
Yes.
So that's his thing, and there's a recurring trope of like, every time they ask anyone's opinion, it's always, they have like these three guys that deliver these opinions in threes. Like, oh, what do you think about the radio station? Cool. Great. Awesome. What do you think about AC Slater? Sucks. Horrible. Wag a skunk in front of his face.
Yeah, that's the thing everybody says, that is like, he stinks so bad that somebody should hold a skunk up in front of him.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't get this joke, but they make it 3 times.
Right.
So anyway.
So flashing back to the Max when we're having our telethon to save it, and it's going, it starts off with a bang because Lisa gets up and says some latest gossip, who's dating who or whatever, you know, I'll only tell you. She has like a gossip cliffhanger.
Right,
and that gets
right.
the phones
Yeah,
to
it's
start.
like a blind item. This boy is dating, this guy was seen out on this date, but he's also dating. Oh, if you want the details, you have to, spend the cash.
Yeah, and there are a lot of like ironic cuts in this part where you have somebody go like, all right, we're just getting started, and then it cuts to like hours later and they haven't made any more money. Yeah, we get the impression, we skip ahead, it's all petering out, they're not going to reach their goal.
Yeah, they're at like 800, or they're at like 8,600 or something,
Yeah.
and they're just not going to get there because everybody's falling asleep, and Belding's spinning records from the 60s, and no one's really paying attention
there's another
anymore.
ironic cut with him where he's like, oh, don't worry, I have the secret sauce or whatever, and then cut to, no, that didn't work. And then, Slater comes in, and he's the one that gives the rousing speech and shows that when it really matters, he can find the words, and he, gives this great oration, and the phones start ringing, and the Max is safe.
That's right. They raised $10,000 so that this very irresponsible magician can keep his diner for children that is doing a booming business, but he can't seem to pay his rent open.
Yeah, we should also mention Screech treated everybody to an Al Bundy impression.
Oh, that was hilarious.
Yeah, it was a surprisingly good, like he does that Ed O'Neill, like, hey, Peg, how you doing? Like that kind of voice.
Well, and he also was, how in that show, in the Married with Children show, Ed O'Neill would always like scrunch up his face and do this like Peg kind of thing, which is not the right voice at all.
It's a largely visual impression.
Yeah, it was. He just would like scrunch up his face and squint his eyes and sort of move his mouth to the side, and that like Screech, Dustin Diamond had that spot.
Yeah, you get the impression Dustin Diamond was like, hey, look, I could do a Al Bundy impression. They're like, great, 30 seconds less to write on the show. Let's do it.
You're hilarious.
Yeah, we also get a Slater callback to Webster where he's going to pitch in his piggy bank, right? Because he calls and says, I got
$100.
He's all melancholy, but he'll pledge $100. And then, he comes and like we said, he gives the speech. He saves everybody in typical Saved by the Bell style. The denouement of the episode is about 8 seconds long. The phones start ringing. They say, okay, looks like we're going to make enough money. Roll credits. Right?
Yeah.
Totally done. So again, this one, I never thought I would see the day where I'm saying Saved by the Bell had the more realistic take on this. The restaurant wasn't making money. So the people that, that get the rent checks say it's time to do something else.
No, but see, that's the thing. It does make money. The guy just wasn't paying his rent. I disagree on that. I think that Charles in Charge had the more realistic plot.
In what? Well,
in that it's some
shady...
shady dude who is on the college board but also owns property in the town and is also owning businesses and is trying to leverage his power to make his business do better. Hell yeah, that's every college town.
Yeah, I guess you've got a point. But at least if the pizza place were doing okay, well, I mean, I guess
it was doing okay. It was doing great.
No, but that's why I was about to say they wouldn't just randomly like look for a thriving business to tear down, but that's sort of addressed by the whole twist of the story.
Exactly.
So, fair enough. All right. Let's finish it off with Home Improvement.
Season 8, Episode 21, A Hardware Habit to Break.
Yeah, so now that we're well into the mid to late 90s, we have a clear...
This is 99,
All
so
right,
yes.
Late 90s, we've got a clear villain, right? Big businesses, chain stores, discount marts, right? This is You've Got Mail all over again.
Right. The big box hardware store has come to town and they're pricing out anybody who wants to go to the local hardware store. Yep. But that's not the reason the place is closing. They're doing an okay business.
Yes, we've got, what's his name? Harry. This is our second Harry of the night, I guess. Mm-hmm. Harry, the proprietor of Harry's Hardware, which we've had a major sitcom study episode that involved Harry's Hardware because little Mark stole from them.
Yes, that's
in
right.
Our shoplifting episode. Yeah,
little Mark, not so little anymore.
No, well, let's just not even address that yet. We're familiar with Hardware Harry or whatever as a hangout. Jesus, Hardware Harry, the hangout for the happy hooligans at Tool Time.
Home Improvement.
There we go. Okay. He's moving to Tucson with his wife. She's got
asthma.
She's got asthma. We later find out is a prolific cigar smoker, so that might be part of the reason. But so perfect storm. We've got Tool Barn. They're the conglomerate that's taken over, and we get all these references to the prices are too high here. I could get this cheaper at Tool Barn.
Yeah, but that's only later on. That's not at the
fair
beginning.
Enough.
That's once Tim buys him out and takes over, then the customer base starts dwindling.
Yeah, I feel like we get mentions dropped of Tool Barn throughout. And then, we have this thing with the wife moving to Tucson. So we have the gang here now. Season 8 of Home Improvement. Yep. So we're very far along here. Jonathan Taylor Thomas is nowhere to be found. Nope. He must be off filming one of his many highly celebrated films of the 1990s. Was it his version of...
This was when he went away to college, or no, his like senior year of high school, the way they were able to kind of write him off the show. He's not in the credits, but he's in the credit sequence because they still have the pictures of the 3 boys in the credit sequence.
So he's just never around.
He's not in the credits at all anymore. They don't have his name.
But he's not in the show anymore.
Right. This season, I think this is the last season of this show, he, like you said, the way they wrote him off was that he was doing his senior year of high school abroad or something like that because he was, Tiger Beat famous.
Yeah. He was facing off against Macaulay Culkin for that box office,
Macaulay Culkin, no. He was definitely facing off because Macaulay Culkin was our age, so he was older. He was facing off against the Olsen twins for the, tween, teen.
There are certain, that's sort of like Dante's Peak volcano type thing with the like similar movies. I feel like JTT and Macaulay, even if they were separated by a few years, had that thing, like one of them had Man of the House with Chevy Chase and the other one had Getting Even with Dad. Like they're just, they both had similar like projects and they both frankly petered out in terms of their movie careers in the 90s. But JTT, nowhere to be found. We've gone through God knows how many, sexy Tool Time girls. What we've got is this group of dudes hanging out at Hardware Harry's. They're Tim and Al, and I don't know who they are. We later sort of surmise that they're Tim's brothers.
Well, one of them, Marty, the guy who everybody everybody keeps making fun of and he keeps making dumb comments.
Yes, the young looking
Yeah,
guy.
that is the younger brother. Yes. And then the older brother we don't see at all. He's not hanging out with a group of friends at the beginning. He's an accountant, and we see him at the end. And because we're not like home improvement heads, we both at the end, when this, like, we get the three guys standing there together, Marty, Tim, and this guy Jeff, and they're like, oh, remember when we dug that big hole in the backyard? Yeah, Mom was so mad at us. And they're like having a three brothers moment. And I was like, wait, are these guys all brothers? I'm so confused.
Yes, and I still didn't think one of them was a brother.
But they are.
Yeah, this younger guy, we just, whatever. I just take it as, okay, we've got new friends now. Because this younger guy really does seem like a pretty main part of this story.
Yeah, he's sort of established as like one of the buddies. And then you got a couple other, like you said, random guys hanging out, this Eddie guy and Benny.
There's a Benny. They're all incensed by the thought of their hangout becoming a nail salon, right? What's worse than a parking lot for a bunch of dudes that grunt and think that like buzzsaws are cool is that their hardware store is going to become a nail salon. They can't stomach that idea. And so they're all kind of joking around, or not, joking isn't the right word.
They're all kvetching.
Yeah.
They're sitting around complaining, and they're like, why would we want to give over our awesome hardware store to a place where ladies sit on their asses and gossip all day? And then they looked at each other and they all got up off their stools.
But there's also this thing of like, these are a bunch of, not necessarily affluent, but a bunch of middle-class white guys in their 40s. And so there is a possibility.
Well, and two of them are on a TV show. So like, they have some money.
Exactly. So there is this possibility of one of them maybe just like straight up buying it. And so there's a lot of debate about that.
Well, and Al is already a part owner. So Al is a 20% owner. Right. And so he's like, everyone's just like, Al, why don't you just buy him out? You work here part-time. You're already a part owner. There's no reason for you not to do this. And he pulls Tim aside and he's like, look, I would, except for I'm going to propose to my lady.
I'm going to ask her to become...
I'm going to need the money.
I'm going to ask her to become the next Mrs. Borland.
To which Tim says, you want her to be your mother?
Right. Which, yes, of course Tim would say that. But I still don't get what Al said. Has he been married before? Or is he just setting himself up for the mom joke by saying that?
I think he was just speaking in this sort of funny way where he was saying, like, I want her to be the next Mrs. Borland, meaning I want her to be the next in the line of women who have this name.
Okay, I guess that is what he meant. Strange phrasing. But yeah, basically he waves that away as like, yeah, I don't know, I've got too much on my plate, whatever. And so none of them want to do it. Like, they basically, understandably, are like, we don't want to be the owners of a hardware store.
Right, and Tim kind of considers it, but his wife, Jill, is like, we've got 3 boys to put through college.
Okay, so now that we're back at the house, let's talk about the boys. I audibly gasped when I saw, Brad? This oldest kid looks like Dolph Lundgren.
He looks like, and I've said this forever, he looks like Nick Carter from the Backstreet Boys.
But not now. He's Nick Carter on steroids. Like, he looks like he's about to get in the ring, with some sort of heavyweight. Okay. Yeah, this kid is like, I don't want to be the cute little kid anymore. I'm going to work out and be fucking jacked, I think.
Well, I think also he was one of these kids that kind of started getting chunky. And so what do you do when you start getting chunky and you're on TV? You work out. So he has this sort of like in between, I'm, going to the gym and I'm a little bit heavy sort of thing going on.
Yeah, they definitely, for better or worse. He
looks like he's a kid in high school that plays football. That's what he looks like.
Yeah, which again, like, it's totally normal. That's what happens to kids. But I did gasp. I will say again, like Dolph Lundgren in the 90s, like that's him.
And then the little one, little Mark, comes in and he's talking like this.
Yes, they're all through puberty.
Like,
Mark
is so weird.
Mark is like still skinny and kind of cute baby face type kid. But yeah, they decided for better or worse to not do the thing of let's have another kid so we have a cute kid on the show. So now we just have 1, nowhere to be found. He's off filming movies, and 2 young men that are just like here in the house with them. So they don't really get all that much to do. their first plan is sort of similar to Charles. They're going to host a party, right, to try to sort of
fundraiser, yeah.
Yeah, is it like a fundraiser per se, or they actually want to like essentially convince somebody to buy the restaurant?
Yeah, they basically decide that they're going to invite a bunch of like money people that Tim has connections with to the house, have a little, cocktail hour dinner party, and start just, networking, kicking around the idea of, hey, maybe somebody should buy this place. To it all turns into them all yelling at Tim, like, why did you bring us here to buy something? Why don't you buy the place? What's wrong with you? Put your money where your mouth is. Yeah. So Tim, having already told Jill, you're right, we can't afford that, and I don't have the time to do it, caves under peer pressure and says, you're right, I should buy the place. That's it, I'm buying it.
No, yes, it is straight up peer pressure. Like they're basically just like chanting for him to do it. Now at this party, there's a few things going on. You've got the skeeviest guy in the world, like coming on to Jill, or rather saying to Tim, your old ball and chain's looking hot, right? And Tim goes over and it's like, hey, why don't you give that guy a little attention? You've got Harry, the hardware store guy, is there chain smoking in front of his wife, the asthma lady. You've got in general this thing of that 90s, small business thing that we were talking about, where Jill is the one, when Tim first mentions this whole predicament in the first place, she starts going like, yeah, the same thing's happening at the bookstore. The bookstore is now this sterile corporate place, you know, and it's, just again, it really like, that's the theme here. And it is one of those things that we look back on and just kind of go like, we lost that battle. Like, this is, this is something that's true, and it's a bit of a shame, and it happened.
And it happened, and so many of them are gone. Now, there are still places where that's not true, but, it's for the most part, we did, the big box stores did win out. And this is 1999, and when I looked at the date again, and it reminded me that I have had a few of these experiences, not where we like saved our hangout by doing a big fundraiser or this, that, or the other thing. But my group of friends, we were really into coffee shops. I was a theater kid in high school, so we were like artsy fartsy. We liked to smoke our clove cigarettes, and we liked to hang out in coffee shops. That was like our jam. And there were several coffee shops over the years that Starbucks and Joffrey's would build their stores right across the street. Yeah. And eventually our cool hangout coffee shops,
Tom Hanks' strategy, and you've got me.
Exactly, would go out of business. And so this was in my days where I was like, I hated Starbucks with just so much ire, and would not go there. And I would go to my brother's baseball games, and I would go on rants about how Starbucks and SUVs were killing our country. And I think back on that now, and now of course, like, drive an SUV and go to Starbucks. I mean, I guess not now, I have a regular car, but had an SUV for quite a long time. Like, you think about that and it's like, yeah, they won, but like, it's my fucking fault.
Yeah,
like,
to an extent.
Like, I'm the one that used to say, oh, you can't close down my coffee shop. I'm never going to your stupid, gross coffee. Coffee's much better here, and all this stuff.
The difference is, I think, food establishments have a chance, because that's something that there will always be some sort of a need for, like, retail food, for lack of a better, for like some sort of brick and mortar food. And there is the possibility of, like, even if they're a little more expensive, like they could have really great bagels or soup or whatever it is. Whereas things like bookstores or hardware stores, it is really rough. And it is, now it's not obviously.
Because the product is the actual, like, it's a nut, you're buying a bolt or you're buying a nut, you know what I mean?
Most
like,
of us,
it's not the same, like, it's the same thing. Whereas, like, the feeling you get when your coffee is delicious, and yes, it's better coffee, but, at my local
the difference
place.
Between us and Tim the Toolman Taylor is, for him, the hardware store is this like sacred place. And for most of us, it's like, who cares? And now, obviously, the threat is not the big box stores anymore. The concept of going to a store at all seems silly, if I need some sort of special wrench.
Who has hangouts now?
Yeah, again, it's one thing like people still go to drink coffee, drink alcohol. Not as many people are going to hang out at the mall or at a store because you're just helping somebody pay the rent for this brick and mortar place that they have that is not really a necessary part of the process for you, buying your product.
Yeah.
Anyway, Tim buys the store, and they find out pretty quickly that their customers are revolting because the prices are so much cheaper at Tool Barn, and they can't. The brother is helping them out working at the store, but he's just getting impatient with the customers, going, if you like Tool Barn so much, go buy their stuff, and basically everything's falling apart immediately.
Right.
Not unlike when Webster tried to run the restaurant.
Yeah. Well, and so Tim's like, I don't understand it. Sales are down. They weren't this low when Harry was here. And I don't know if it's Al or somebody else who's like, well, that's because people who shopped here, it's one of their other friends.
It's Wilson, I thought, who comes in and says it's all about the personal relationship.
Yeah, is it Wilson? And we get all the funny little things where like Wilson's holding products up in front of his face so that we still don't see his face. The best one is the rake.
I was going to say, the rake is it's definitely the most effective.
Yeah, and also it's the moment where he's like laughing. Like the guy playing the little brother, his character's name is Marty, and he is, he's like, oh man, I know what we could do. We could print out some flyers and then we could go paper the neighborhood on our bikes. And Tim just starts like ribbing him relentlessly. He's like, oh yeah, Timmy, can we do that? Should we get Lassie to come too? And you see the guy playing Wilson behind the rake just like cracking up laughing at the way Tim, the way he's like messing with his little brother. Yeah. But really it was the actors, like they had to cut the guy who was playing Marty out of frame because he was laughing so hard. So you like only are seeing Tim just sort of standing back grinning at what, he like that he made everybody break. So anyway, you've got all the characters there, and they're saying like the reason that this store worked before was because of the relationship, and they knew that they trusted Harry. And that's when their other friend comes in and is like, yeah, I bought some over at, Tool Town or whatever, Tool Box Barn or something the other week because it's cheaper over there. So I don't feel guilty about it anymore because it's not Harry. And I don't have this relationship with you. And they're like, geez, man, because he's one of their friends. So if he's going to do that, then everybody's going to do that. So that's when they decide that he and Al are going to give, they're going to have free videos for checkout. Yes,
another multi-pronged approach, a video library.
That's right, to do any project. So any project you might want to do, we have a video, a how-to video to do that.
This is very clever on their part.
That's a good idea.
The fact that they are the hosts of this home improvement show.
Yeah.
And why not, at a time when you can't just look up tutorials online. Actually, you're almost at the time when you can. Yeah, make this video library of all your Tool Time episodes. And so you've got a hardware store / hardware themed video store.
Well, and that's the thing. They didn't have to go shoot all new things because they had it already.
Yeah, it's really
just
smart.
old episodes of their show where they did the things. And then they also said, and we bought these cell phones, and they got these old ass like flip cell phones.
Yes, this was the second prong is where they make their mistake.
Right.
Their 24-hour-a-day hotline
that connects with each of them.
Yeah.
So you can get Tim or Al any time of day, 24 hours a day. One of them is always on call with the phone, and will help you answer, talk you through any question you have, any problem you have when it comes to home improvement stuff.
So we get fun stuff with they missed their cue on the TV show because they're both on their phones backstage helping customers. And then Tim, during his romantic time with Jill, gets phone calls. And so he has to fix somebody's toilet or walk him through fixing the toilet.
Yeah, snake in the toilet.
Yeah, that
turns out it's his older brother.
Yeah. The whole third act is basically that. It's like this whole thing is taking a toll on them, having to be so responsible. It's working. And they're having their most profitable week ever at the hardware store because now they've got all these people that they have these like entrenched relationships
Yeah.
with.
And it's great. Business is booming. It's really wonderful. But Tim and Al already have a full-time job.
Yeah.
And now they have two. And they've got Marty there, as the like sales guy, doing everything. But they're just Tim and, after it ruins his romantic night with Jill, he is just like, he makes the decision that he needs to sell. And so he goes in the next day. And his other brother is there. And he's like, Marty, what'd you invite him for? And he's like, oh, he had me come over and look at the books. And he's like, well, don't worry about that because I'm selling. And the older brother's like, well, why? It's, you're more profitable now than you were when Harry was here. All the improvements that you've done have worked. And he's like, yeah, but I can't keep up this pace. Like, I literally have no life. I'm running a business and I'm running a show and I can't, I can't do it. I'm missing out on important things with my family. And his older brother is like, well, why didn't you just ask for some help? Like, I'll take over part ownership and help out with it. And he's like, wait, what? And then they have this moment where like the three brothers, and he's like, and once Marty's back on his feet, he can buy into it too. And so now it's the three brothers are going to own the hardware store. I
put Deus Ex bald guy. Yeah. Like this whole thing just ends with the older brother going like, oh, let's see.
I don't already have a full-time job. I'll help too.
You don't have enough time? I'll help you with some of the work. And you're not sure about the money? I'll give you some of the money. And the phone calls are taking too long. Well, what if you didn't do as many? And like they just sort of like walk back everything in the show. And he's like, well, all right, I guess if you're willing to do that, then I guess problem solved. And so
season 8. That's what.
Yeah, it is just, again, this one does not have a villain looming over it that they have to convince. This is purely just like, is this or isn't it a good idea?
Yeah, how do we compete in the world of there being a big box store, but not like, oh,
and I guess you're
trying
happy
to shut him down.
For once we have a Tim the Toolman episode where he's not even doing anything that dumb or selfish. Like, he's only being a little dumb by agreeing to buy the restaurant or to buy the hardware store for no reason other than people were chanting his name and saying, buy it.
Right.
But he's not as much of an asshole as he usually is. And
no, that's true.
The solution, like, the whole thing is just like a very sort of low conflict affair,
Yeah. Yeah.
It's sort of running them ragged to do it. They get a little help, and now they'll be able to do it.
I mean, I guess this is the thing. I don't understand how, the bald guy really is going to solve any problems. The older brother, he's an accountant. He has his own firm. He already also has a full-time job.
Yeah. Well,
so just having another partner in there isn't gonna.
Yeah, one of the things
I don't see how it's
says,
really going to help.
One of the suggestions is like actually quite realistic in a way, but just like does not work for a show to me when he goes like, well, now that you've got all these loyal customers, just scale back the hours a little, which is actually like, yeah, okay, like that probably is what you would do. But it just sort of seems like an inelegant sitcom denouement, if you will, for him to be like, oh, okay, well, now I guess I just won't work nights. All right, roll credits.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't know. The whole thing seemed a little hokey.
Yeah, although I could say this is the one where, I mean, look, this is what? Season 8, episode 21. Is there a 9th season?
No, this is it, I think.
Okay, so I guess it's kind of a moot point. I mean, I was wondering if this would change the shape of the show a little bit, if this is like they do in so many shows where they're like, oh, we're running out of ideas. What if Uncle Jesse owns the nightclub now? You know?
No, this is the last season and we're like 2 episodes away from the end.
All right, fair enough. Well, what do we think? We've got a lot of hangouts, interesting overlaps, and interesting differences, I think. MVPs, highs, lows, thoughts, concerns, questions, etc.?
Oh, let's see. I was delighted by the nostalgia of the Webster episode, I think. That was fun. I can't believe I'm going to say this. I liked the Charles episode the best, which makes me angry. I thought it was really funny how every time, except for the hardware store episode, every single time it was going to be turned into a parking lot. Like, it was never, oh no, we're doing this for the good of the community because we're going to create a better restaurant, or we're going to put something in there.
Did specify parking lot?
They sure did.
Okay.
Yeah. And so it was just like, wait, what? Why is everything going to be a parking lot?
Yeah. This one, like I said, I feel like it's an interesting trope in the way that it is sort of devoid of like personal growth. And it is like, for all these shows, or at least, a handful of them being about young people. And this is just sort of like I said before, like, let's give an antagonist, let's give a predicament, and then let's have like everybody have a little job to do that can sort of help us solve it. And so, yeah, I'm just trying to think, like, going back over these. In Webster, they save their hangout by sort of appealing to her good nature and getting her to understand that, or almost ultimately understanding about her, that her heart was in the right place. And if she understands that, everyone loves the diner so much, and they just kind of like...
Well, it was that her baby brother was being taken care of.
Right.
And that she didn't need to take care of him by getting him to retire early and give up this thing that broke her father.
Right. So
and
they
he worked to the bone, fingers to the bone till he died.
They solve it through understanding, essentially. Yeah. And then with Charles in charge, it's the opposite. Like, we have a true villain that they solve through John Grisham-esque intrigue and solving the mystery and figuring out the corruption. Saved by the Bell, we get like good old fashioned telethon, right? Like, raise money and, get the people to participate. And then Home Improvement, we get just sort of like straight up individual purchase, just buy it yourself and figure out a way to make it work.
A family, you know what I mean? It's family coming together. You've got the three brothers. Like I said, I didn't know that was a thing, but it was a nice little moment there when they were, reminiscing about growing up and they're laughing. And then it's kind of like the way the three boys, Tim's three boys, were in, previous seasons when we've seen them band together, and even a little bit in that one where Mark stole the knife, the like Swiss Army knife. The brothers, they helped each other out. They were trying to protect each other from the parents.
Yeah. That one in a lot of ways is kind of like the same way that I would watch these sitcoms as like a 12-year-old and try to get some scrap of insight into like dating as a teenager and stuff. The fact that this Home Improvement actually sort of deals with some of the realities of like business ownership and the small business trying to compete with the large business and everything, as ridiculous as it is, it does scratch that itch a little bit of me being like, okay, interesting. Yeah, kind of, so in that sense, it having a little bit of like reality to it, and like, oh, what would it be like if Tim actually bought out the hardware store? That makes it kind of fun to me.
Yeah.
Saved by the Bell is obviously like, it is, sort of the worst sitcom ever. That's why we love it. It just operates on its own rules. It's completely ridiculous. It's basically a live action cartoon, So like, what can you say? The Charles in Charge is fun, and look, of course, again, the Harrison Bartlett of it all, you're not going to say anything bad about that. But I really loved the Webster. It was surprisingly sitcom-y to me. Like, Webster I associate with like always just ending with Webster being on somebody's knee and having to confess like, oh, I told a lie and I didn't mean to, or something like that. This one was just like, all right, Webster and George in the kitchen flipping eggs, and like that Babe character was just hilarious to me. Everything she said, funny. Every time she would just go like, all right, Toots, get out of here. Hey, Shorty, what are you doing? Like, yeah, I thought she was a really fun character. So I think that takes it for me. But again, just lots of interesting, like, these ones were definitely not totally on the same page, but it's interesting to see the way they overlap.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so much for saving our hangout. What are we talking about next week?
Well, while we have the KKTY radio station from Saved by the Bell in mind, let's listen to some other student radio stations. We're going to watch Welcome Back, Kotter, Season 3, Episode 16, Sweatwork, Family Ties, Season 2, Episode 7, Sweet Lorraine, A Different World, Season 1, Episode 15, Dr. Cupid, and Boy Meets World, Season 2, Episode 17, On the Air.
Yep, the school radio stations are next week, and until then, we will consider this segment of the sitcom study concluded. Thank you for listening to the Sitcom Study. Tell us what you think or share your own TV tropes and topic ideas by sending a self-addressed stamped email to sitcomstudypodcast@gmail.com or find us on Facebook or Instagram. And if you like the show, consider leaving a rating or review on your podcast app. It helps us boost those precious Nielsen ratings. The Sitcom Study is recorded in front of a live studio dog.